I could see the little brushy tail of the razor bag. It was switching back and forth in a brisk, impatient sort of way. "What's the message?" I glanced up at her and whirled to run as quickly as I could. If I hadn't ingested some vampire blood at the beginning of the summer, I couldn't have turned in time, and I would have taken the blow on my face and chest instead of my back. It felt exactly as though someone very strong had swung a heavy wake, and the points had caught in my skin, gone deeper, and torn their way across my back. I couldn't keep to my feet, but pitched forward and landed on my stomach. I heard her laughing behind me, and the hog snuffling, and then I registered the fact that she had gone. I lay there crying for a minute or two. I was trying not to shriek, and I found myself panting like a woman in labor, attempting to master the pain. My back hurt like hell. I was mad, too, with the little energy I could spare. I was just a living bulletin board to that bitch, that Maynard, whatever the hell she was. As I crawled over twigs and rough ground, pine needles and dust, I grew angrier and angrier. I was shaking all over from the pain and the rage, dragging myself along until I didn't feel I was worth killing. I was such a mess. I'd begun the crawl back to the car, trying to head back to the likeliest spot for Bill to find me, but when I was almost there, I had second thoughts about staying out in the open. I'd been assuming the road meant help, but of course it didn't. I'd found out a few minutes before that not everyone met by chance was in a helping kind of mood. What if I met up with something else, something hungry? The smell of my blood might be attracting the predator at this very moment. A shark. It said to be able to detect the tiniest particles of blood in the water, and a vampire is surely the shark's land equivalent. So I crawled inside the tree line, instead of staying out beside the road where I'd be visible. This didn't seem like a very dignified or meaningful place to die. This was no Alamo or Thermopylae. This was just a spot in the vegetation by a road in northern Louisiana. I was probably lying in poison ivy. I would probably not live long enough to break out, though. I expected every second that the pain would begin to abate, but it only increased. I couldn't prevent the tears from coursing down my cheeks. I managed not to sob out loud, so I wouldn't attract any more attention, but it was impossible to keep completely still. I was concentrating so desperately on maintaining my silence that I almost missed Bill. He was pacing along the road looking into the woods, and I could tell by the way he was walking that he was alert to danger. Bill knew something was wrong. "Bill," I whispered, but with his vampire hearing it was like a shout. He was instantly still, his eyes scanning the shadows. "I'm here," I said, and I swallowed back a sob. "Watch out, I might be a living booby trap." In the moonlight I could see that his face was clean of emotion, but I knew he was weighing the odds just as I was, and one of us had to move, and I realized if I came out into the moon glow, at least Bill could see more clearly if anything attacked. I stuck my hands out, gripped the grass, and pulled. I couldn't even get up to my knees, so this progress was my best speed. I pushed a little with my feet, though even that use of my back muscles was excruciating. I didn't want to look at Bill while I moved towards him, because I didn't want to soften at the sight of his rage. It was an almost palpable thing. "What did this to you, Suki?" he asked softly. "Get me in the car, please. Get me out of here," I said, doing my best to hold myself together. "If I make a lot of noise, she might come back." I shivered all over at the thought. "Take me to Eric," I said, trying to keep my voice even. She said this was a message for Eric Northman. Bill scattered beside me. "I have to lift you," he told me. "Oh no," I started to say. "There must be some other way," but I knew there wasn't. Bill knew better than to hesitate. Before I could anticipate the pain to its full extent, he scooted an arm under me and applied his other hand to my crotch, and in an instant he had me dangling across his shoulder. I screamed out loud. I tried not to sob after that, so Bill could listen for an attack, but I didn't manage that very well. Bill began to run along the road back to the car. It was running already, its engine idling smoothly. Bill flung open the back door, and tried to feed me gently but quickly onto the back seat of the Cadillac. It was impossible not to cause no more pain by doing this, but he made the attempt. "It was her," I said, when I could say anything coherent. "It was her who made her car stop and made me get out." It was her who made the car stop and made me get out. I was keeping an open mind about whether she'd caused the fight to begin with. "Well, I'll talk about it in a little while," he said. He sped towards Shreveport at the highest speed he could, while I clawed at the upholstery in an attempt to keep control over myself. All I remember about that ride was that it was at least 2 years long. Bill got me to the back door of Fantasia somehow and kicked it to get attention. "What?" Pam sounded hostile. She was a pretty blonde vampire I'd met a couple of times before. A sensible sort of individual with considerable business acumen. "Oh, Bill, what's happened?" "Oh, she's bleeding." "Get Eric," Bill said. "He's been waiting in here," she began, but Bill strode right by her with me bouncing on his shoulder like a bag of bloody game. I was so out of it by that time that I wouldn't have cared if he'd carried me onto the dance floor of the bar out front, but instead Bill blew into Eric's office laden with me and rage. "This is on your account," Bill snarled, and I moaned as he shook me as though he was drawing Eric's attention to me. I hardly see how Eric could have been looking anywhere else, since I was a full-grown female and probably the only bleeding woman in his office. I would have loved to faint, to pass right out, but I didn't. I just sagged over Bill's shoulder and heard. "Go to hell," I mumbled. "What, my darling?" "Go to hell." "We must lay her on her stomach on the couch," Eric said. "Here, let me." I felt another pair of hands grip my legs. Bill sort of turned underneath me, and together they deposited me carefully on the broad couch that Eric had just bought for his office. It had that new smell, and it was leather. I was glad, staring at it from the distance of half an inch, that he hadn't gotten cloth upholstery. "Pam, call the doctor." I heard footsteps leave the room, and Eric crouched down to look into my face. It was quite a crouch, because Eric, tall and broad, looks exactly like what he is, a former Viking. "What has happened to you?" he asked. I glared at him, so incensed I could hardly speak. A message to you," I said, almost in a whisper. "This woman in the woods made Bill's car stop, and maybe even made us argue, and then she came up to me with this hawk." "A pig?" Eric could not have been more astonished if I'd said she had a canary up her nose. "Oink, oink, razorback, wild pig. And she said she wanted to send you a message, and I turned in time to keep her from getting my face, but she got my back, and then she left." "Your face? She would have gotten your face?" Bill said. I saw his hands clenching by his thighs, and the back of him as he began pacing around the office. "Eric, her cuts are not so deep. What's wrong with her?" "Suki," Eric said gently. "What did this woman look like?" His face was right by mine, his thick golden hair almost touching my face. The rest later on.